No, the next one. Next one.
Oh, this one?
So, yeah. So basically, what I just said. So, in Confucius is as a philosopher is very much focused on the road. How should we live? He gives very clear advice. For example, remain calm. Well, not clear, but he gives advice. Remain calm, be patient, be considerate, be brave, and he emphasizes the values, the values of morality, justice, and sincerity. And if you follow that road, if you are calm and patient, if you are considerate and brave, and you act within a moral framework, then you can become a better human being, a gentleman. And a gentleman can get followers, and if you can get followers, you can become a leader. So it starts in a very small set of things, like in your family. But by doing that, by practicing that, by becoming better at managing your family, you will become a better human being, and therefore even be capable of managing a whole country. So the philosophy of Confucius is very much based on virtues. And Western philosophy has like these two streams. I think, therefore I am, is a quote from Descartes. And it's not completely foreign to Eastern philosophy. I think there are parallels. We talked about that last Saturday. With Nishida, who also asked very existentialist question about does the moon above me exist? Is that an object, or does the moon only exist through my eyes? Does the moon exist through me? It's also a very existentialist question. So it's not that it's completely foreign in Eastern philosophy, but we're focusing on Confucius. Therefore, I think that it's good, if we want to look to parallels, to look more at the behavioral philosophy within Western philosophy. And Uno-san, would you mind clicking on the link at the bottom? It's from Alain de Botton. Alain de Botton is kind of a famous, has become kind of a famous person. I think he recorded this video. This is in a book program. He discusses 5 philosophers. Okay. And he has become rather famous. He has a very popular YouTube group. And he's a kind of a household name within modern philosophy. But this program was recorded to promote his book, in which he discusses 5 philosophers and how they are relevant to our daily lives at the moment. He's a very good speaker, very captivating, and he's actually, I learned this from Mary, who teaches the philosophy in university, and she's also using his materials. I heard last Friday when I met with her. So let's have a look. It's a long video. We will not be able to finish it, but maybe 1 or 2 to give you an idea about philosophers who are relevant and how they are relevant to our lives today.
Okay. So now?
Yes, please.
Let's suppose that you're writing a really important email to a colleague. Or a post on Facebook that all your...
Alain de Botton, the author of a new book, The Constellations of Philosophy. What do you mean by the constellations of philosophy?
Well, it's really alluding to a project that certain philosophers have had in the history of philosophy, by no means all, and that is the idea that philosophy can, in some way, cheer you up, make you happier, console you, that there's a practical application to philosophy. It's a minority school of thought in philosophy because most philosophers are not interested in everyday life. And yet it seemed to me that there was a tradition of certain thinkers who were concerned, and what I set out to do in my book was to throw a spotlight on their work. They're all major philosophers, but they are often neglected in academic circles. They're not the philosophers that one could study, and so it seemed important to shine a light on them.
I should say up front that there are 6 philosophers you focus on,
yes,
in no particular order: Nietzsche, Schopenhauer, Montaigne, Socrates, Epicurus, and Seneca, and we'll talk about each of them. But why did you pick these 6 as opposed to another 6?
Sure. Partly it was because I loved reading them. So it was a kind of a personal love affair going on there. Partly also because, as I said, the definition of the project was that it should be philosophers who are concerned with everyday life. And there isn't an infinite range of philosophers. I couldn't have written an essay on Kant within the context of the consolations of philosophy, it seemed to me. So, I think that they came fairly easily to mind. And what's nice about all these philosophers is that they write well, and they're very much united in the idea that it's not just what you say, but how you say it that's important. So they're a pleasure to read.
Are you a philosopher?
Probably not, because I do a lot of writing in other areas as well. And nowadays, I suppose the only people who really call themselves philosophers are people on who earn all their living from doing philosophy, probably in an academic department.
Well,
though I have some loose association with an academic post, it doesn't take up enough time for me to stand up and call myself a philosopher. Although, of course, we should take advice from Socrates, who suggests that we are all philosophers and that the unexamined life is not worth living. So, to answer your question Socratically, not only am I a philosopher, but you are too, and everyone else in this room. So, yeah.
And what is philosophy?
Well, I think as conceived of by someone like Socrates, it would be very loosely defined, simply a logical way of thinking. So philosophy identifies itself not so much by its subject matter as by its method, so that it's a method of approaching questions in a logical, rational way, attempting to define terms and to move smoothly from one point to another, etc., etc. So it distinguishes itself from ordinary muddled thinking, in which we don't say what we mean, and talking rather like I'm talking now. So, to be a philosopher for someone like Socrates, it just means to make sense and to try and strive for coherence in what one's saying.
Is that what it means for all of these 6? Because it sounds like you're saying that philosophy means clear thinking.
Yes. I think all the 6 throw a different emphasis on certain things. So, for example, Seneca and the Stoic school to which he belonged, he envisaged philosophy as a discipline that's designed to assist you to cope with frustration. And it's his responsibility why we still use the word philosophical as a way to suggest, that someone is taking something well, taking a disaster well, and being philosophical about the fact that my house was burnt down. This conception of what philosophy is dates back to the Stoic school. So you're right to say that there are differences in emphasis. Although I think all the philosophers I look at are essentially united in the idea that thinking can help in various ways. There are things you can do in your mind which are worth doing.
Comment on my experience, and that is when I was in college, generally speaking, it was the philosophy majors who were pitied as the ones who were wasting their education because upon graduation they would not be employed.
Yes. Well, I don't think the fact that they're not going to be employed is, by definition, means that their course was a waste of time. My criticism of most philosophy courses is that they do concentrate on some pretty arid subjects, and though I think there's a need to study logic and epistemology and metaphysics, I think there's also a need to study kind of ethical questions of everyday life as well. And I think that this is an area that is neglected by most philosophy departments, which is why they unfairly gain or perhaps slightly fairly gain a reputation as laughingstocks.
You are originally from where?
From Switzerland.
Is there a different approach to the teaching or even the inclusion of philosophy in schooling on the continent as opposed to the United States that you know of?
Not in Switzerland, but I do know that in France, I think when you're from 16 to 18, you are taught philosophy. I'm not sure how much of a good idea this is, because it means that a lot of French people will tell you 5 things about Descartes, which they picked up just before doing their bac. But maybe it's a start. Maybe it's a start.
You've identified some of the aspects of philosophy that are relevant, and they're all listed in the, I guess it's the contents page of your book. You address unpopularity, not having enough money, frustration, inadequacy, a broken heart, and difficulties. Which came first, the philosophers in your mind to address these, or these issues to address these philosophers?
Well, what I wanted to do in my book was not so much write an introduction, a kind of general introduction to philosophy, because that seemed a task that hundreds of others have done quite well. It seemed important to me to drive one question through each philosopher's thought, so not to try and say everything about them, but to try and pick out one consoling dimension to their thought. And really, what it took was for me to read these philosophers and then ask myself, what do I think is really interesting here? What do I think really helps here? So I guess I started with a philosopher and then wound up with a conception of what it was that I felt was really at the core of their work.
Well, let's start then with Socrates, as you did. Who was he? When did he live?
Well, he lived in ancient Athens. He was we know first of all, we know not that much about him because he never wrote anything down. So what we know of him has come down to us through Plato's dialogues. Plato was a pupil of Socrates. He led a very unusual life. He never wore any sandals. It was said that he'd been born in order to spite shoemakers. He wore a dirty cloak throughout the year. It was very rare for him to have a bath. And he was a kind of an outsider figure in ancient Athens. And what he would do is to go up to important figures in the marketplace and basically ask them to explain the meaning of life. And by this, really, one has in mind the idea of someone who is asking people to explain why they're living a certain way. Why is it that they value one thing and not another? Why is it that they're taking something seriously but neglecting something else? He would go up to people and say, explain to me what virtue is, or explain what courage is, or why do you believe that making money is important, etc. And many people were very annoyed by this kind of constant provocation, this need to think about things. But it was essential to Socrates' project. And I think what one, ask, well, what is interesting about this man? And I think he's the first person to make a distinction, which is key, between truth and opinion. He believed that there is, on one side, the truth, which is something that you've thought about rationally, logically, and have really tried to understand. And then there's opinion, which is our intuition, stuff we pick up in the marketplace. And he believed that philosophy must try to ally itself to the truth and stand up against mere opinion. So, it's possible to say that 98% of Americans believe X, and nowadays in our own culture we think, oh, well, then X must be right. Socrates' answer would be, well, hang on, what we need to do is to try and systematically analyze what this position is, and it may be that 98% of Americans are simply wrong. So I think he lends us courage to defend certain minority opinions so long as we've thought about them properly. He lets us imagine that many of the opinions that are dominant in our culture might be wrong, or at least very muddled. And this is why he's proved a source of great inspiration to people facing opposition throughout the centuries.
What is the Socratic method?
Well, the Socratic method of thinking is really a distillation of the kind of mental maneuvers that Socrates seemed to be engaged in when he talked to Athenians in the marketplace. And really what it boils down to is an attempt to question common sense and to try and disprove it, or at least try and find exceptions to it. So, a typical thing might be, you take a common sense belief like, money will make you happy. Now, the Socratic method would be to take that statement and think, well, okay, can I show any exceptions to this statement? Is this statement really true? Or are there certain situations where that statement will not be true? And one could say, yes, if you've got no friends, but you've got a lot of money, you're unlikely to be very happy. So already there's a kind of, not necessarily that statement is wrong, but there's an imprecision. And the Socratic method is an attempt to refine rather baggy, loose, imprecise definitions that are bandied about in common sense conversations, and try and sharpen them by trying to find exceptions to them. It may sound like a relatively tedious process. In a way, it's common sense, but it's common sense made explicit.
Go ahead.
So that actually, we were talking last Saturday about a big difference between Western and Eastern society, or actually Japanese society, about basically in Japanese society there is this tendency to read air and to leave a lot of things unchallenged, not even discuss about them, because we have a common understanding. That's implicitly assumed we have common understanding. So this goes 180 degrees against what Socrates was teaching. Socrates actually made his major point was actually to challenge everything that was unquestioned and question everything. Even though it seems that there was a very wide support in favor of certain ideas, he wanted to challenge them. His slogan was, "A life unexamined is a life not worth living."
Mm. はい、皆さんこんにちは、雲野です。今日はですね、雲野塾の研修のプログラムをご紹介したいと思います。で、こういうふうなホームページありますけれども、ぜひですね、一度中身をご覧になっていただきたいと思います。今日はブーキューブさんのスタジオに来て、この収録をしておりますので、中身はこういうふうになってて、今最近ホットなね、グローバルリーダーの定義など書いてあります。で、特に経団連が作成しました留学すれば英語ができて専門性を持つというだけではですね、グローバルリーダーになれないとここに書いてありますようにですね、仕事ができる、専門性を持つ、英語ができるだけじゃなくてですね、私どもの塾ではリベラルアースということと、それからもう一つは孫子の兵を、さらにはですね、日本の歴史というものを合わせて教えることによって、皆さんが海外の欧米の方々と、もしくは華僑圏の方々と正々堂々と渡り合えるような人物を育成しようというふうなことを考えています。ここに次のスライドが出ておりますけれども、ここに書いてありますのはですね、さらに、私どもの雲野塾の中身につきましてはですね、欧米の資料しか使っておりません。また実際に雲野塾は英語でやっておりますので、英語の講師が話しておりますけど、学習はですね、日本の歴史をまだ教えてますので、学習の午後はですね、日本のプログラムをしております。で、以前はこれ有料だったので、今はですね、実際に会場費も取っていただいておりませんで、毎回5000円ということで、朝9時から午後5時までやっておりますので、ぜひ皆さんですね、ご検討の上ご参加いただければと。英語のできない方もですね、学習の午後こういうふうな研修をしておりますので、ぜひご参加いただければというふうに思っておりますので、よろしくお願いします。で、ここにさらにですね、グループ討議とか実務の勘どころを教えると書いてありますけど、実際には私が10年ほどですね、欧米の新聞とか雑誌等をですね、集めてきた、もともと英語のベースでございますので、そうしたものをですね、50セッションのテーマに分けて資料作成しております。そういうことで、世界のオペレーション、もしくはカントリーリスクも含めてですね、しかも世界のトップの方々に対してもいろいろな分析とか洞察をしてですね、議論をしております。そういったことも含めてですね、今後ともよろしくお願いしたいと思います。以上で私の挨拶を終えますが、今回のこのビデオの収録にあたってはですね、V キューブさんのスタジオをお借りしてですね、お時間を頂戴して、このビデオを作成させていただきました。よろしくお願いします。どうもありがとうございました。